Only 3 or 4 in some spots. It's going to feel pretty chilly. Again, eastern Scotland could see the highest temperatures. A little bit of rain could trickle in here during Tuesday evening, and same goes for the central belt. Maybe just a little bit of light rain and drizzle during tomorrow evening, but otherwise, again, most places staying dry. Not much rain around this week, certainly not across England and Wales. There will be wet and windy spells across the far north, and although there'll be some sunny spells, generally fairly cloudy.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world. If
you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
And welcome to We Need to Talk About on GB News with me, Alex Phillips, where we get stuck into the issues that we should be looking at in depth. Nothing is off the table and nobody will be cancelled for saying what they think. Keeping me company today is political commentator Emma Webb. And here's what's coming up on the show. With Sue Gray's Partygate report expected by the end of the week and Tory blackmail claims being reported to the police, will it be bye-bye Boris on Friday? And if that wasn't enough, the PM is also facing allegations of Islamophobia in the Conservative Party as a former Muslim minister claims she was sacked because of her faith. But should religion have any place in politics? MPs and charities warn that the proposed online safety bill is useless against child abuse and violence against women. Enough is enough. Surely it's time the Tories cracked down on porn. That's what we're talking about for the next hour. But what do you need to talk about? Email me, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or of course you can tweet me at gbnews. But first, it's time for the GB News headlines.
Good afternoon, it's 1 minute past 2. I'm Rosie Wright in the GB News newsroom. Let's get you up to date. The Prime Minister is warning Russia invading Ukraine would be a disastrous step. His comments come as the Foreign Office confirms some British staff are being withdrawn from the embassy in Kiev in response to the growing threat from Russia. The US has also ordered the families of American staff at their embassy to leave the country. Russia has over 100,000 troops currently stationed at its border with Ukraine, but denies claims that it's planning an invasion. Well, when asked if he believed an invasion was imminent, the UK Prime Minister said he thinks the intelligence is pretty gloomy.
The plan for a lightning war that could take out Kiev is one that everybody can see. We need to make it very clear to the Kremlin, to Russia, that that would be a disastrous step. But we also need to get over the message that invading Ukraine from a Russian perspective is going to be a painful, violent and bloody business.
Boris Johnson has said he's taking the MP Nusrat Ghani's claims that she was sacked as a junior minister because of concerns about her Muslimness extremely seriously. He's asked the Cabinet to conduct an inquiry into the allegations. Ms Ghani's welcomed the investigation but stressed the inquiry must include all that was said in Downing Street and by the whip. Well, the Labour Party chair, Annalise Dodds, told us at GB News that the government have to take her claims seriously.
We've seen Islamophobic hate crimes really disturbingly increasing substantially over recent months. We need a government that gets a grip on this, just as on everything else. And of course, this is a government in chaos that seems to be incapable of taking decisions.
Meanwhile, the Prime Minister is braced for the publication of Sue Gray's report into allegations of Downing Street parties during lockdown. The Education Secretary Nadhim Zahawi has told us the findings that we are expecting to be released this week will be completely open to the public.
He's human. He makes mistakes. He made a mistake on this issue and he came to Parliament and actually said, sorry, but we've had the apology. We now need the detail, which is why the Sue Gray investigation is important. She will make her findings completely public, and that's the right thing. And the Prime Minister has then absolutely pledged to come to Parliament, make a statement and be scrutinised on those findings.
The UK High Court has ruled Julian Assange can appeal against the decision to extradite him to the United States. The WikiLeaks founder is wanted in America over alleged conspiracy following the publication of hundreds of thousands of leaked documents related to the Afghanistan and Iraq wars. While speaking outside the High Court today, his partner, Stella Morris, says the decision is still a long way from justice.
The situation now is that the Supreme Court has to decide whether it will hear the appeal. But make no mistake, we won today in court. As long as this case isn't dropped, as long as Julian isn't freed, Julian continues to suffer.
In Germany, a lone gunman has wounded several people with a long gun at a lecture theatre in the southwest city of Heidelberg. Police said that the perpetrator was dead, but didn't give any details of how that happened. The German newspaper Bild is reporting that the shooter opened fire in the lecture hall before turning his weapon on himself. The Liverpool taxi bomber Ahmed al-Swiman's asylum claim was rejected 6 years before his attack. Newly obtained court documents showed the Iraqi-born 32-year-old also falsely claimed to be of Syrian heritage. He died when his homemade bomb detonated in a taxi outside of Liverpool Women's Hospital last November. New changes to the highway code now, they're due to come into effect at the end of the week, are dangerous, say some campaigners. The updated advice includes encouraging cyclists to ride in the middle of the road, and it's going to give drivers more responsibility to watch out for people cycling and pedestrians. Well, the Alliance of British Drivers says there's a lack of a plan to notify road users of the changes. Well, pending parliamentary approval, the new advice will come into effect this Saturday. The Prime Minister has announced that coronavirus testing for double-vaccinated travellers arriving in England will be axed. Boris Johnson didn't confirm when the travel rules will be eased, but it's expected to happen before the February half-term break. The Transport Secretary, Grant Shapps, will announce the details in new travel regulations in the Commons this afternoon, and of course we're bringing them here when we get them. You are now up to date here on GB News. I'll bring you more as we get it. Now we need to talk about an Alex.
Two weeks ago, you'd never heard of Sue Gray. Now, her report could bring down the government by the end of the week. With Dominic Cummings sending his written evidence to the inquiry and tittle-tattle that Downing Street coppers have spilled damning evidence on goings-on under their watch, is the Prime Minister's fate sealed? We may get 50 shades of grey, but the mob is baying for black and white. Yet Boris's Brexit Britain has finally, after a pregnant pandemic pause, started showing glimmers of good governance, just as the guillotine could fall. Truly independent foreign policy has enabled an assertive UK back onto the world stage. Boris may even back a VAT cut on energy, something only possible due to Brexit. And the economy is set to recover quicker than other developed nations due to the Prime Minister's firmness on Freedom Day, seeing the WHO call Britain the first country to likely emerge from the pandemic. If Boris survives, will he double down on recent success? Can a successor keep the foot on the gas? Or has the conveyor belt of chaos stymied any chance to make good on Brexit dividends? We need to talk about the forthcoming Grey Day. Well, here's what Boris Johnson had to say about allegations of Islamophobia earlier while he was visiting. Oh, we don't have that clip, so we're just going to gracefully pass over that. Joining me now instead on the show is Chief Political Correspondent at The Telegraph, Christopher Hope. Christopher, Chopper, should I say. Finally, great to have you on the show. Is Boris going to make it to the end of the week?
I think he is. I think it's going to be, he's damaged. I mean, there's no question that the chaos around him, he's got to deal with that. But I think there's no one really out there who can get to the parts of the country that others can't reach. I think there's a lot of Twitter noise, isn't there, around leadership. But frankly, there's no one quite cuts it like Boris. I think this drama is all in his doing to sort out. He can do it if he wants to. Can he find it in him to reboot his premiership and get ready for the next election, now just 18 months to 2 years away?
And do you think actually this could be the making of him after sort of potentially coming so close to losing it all? Will this see the Prime Minister double down and really try and push out policies with conviction to set a legacy?
I think that's right. I think he's got a chance here. And indeed, were there a vote of no confidence in him, if the number of 54 letters did breach that number in the crucial hours after the Sue Gray report comes, maybe on Wednesday or Thursday, that could definitely happen, that he could fight that battle, a bit like John Major tried to do in the 90s, and then try and emerge more strongly from that. That's what I think he might hope for. He seems a bit besieged by events, which is unusual for a Prime Minister who wanted to be world king originally. And the question is, how can he harness that and fight back properly? No one's really clear what Johnsonism is. We've been smothered by the blanket of a coronavirus a pandemic, which has meant that lots of other policies have been deadened down or disappeared altogether. We're due to see a levelling up white paper next month. Question marks about now whether he'll push forward with the national insurance contribution rise in April. So there's a chance here for Boris Johnson to define what he stands for, to become more like Tony Blair than Gordon Brown, as he is at the moment.
And who is to blame for everything that's gone on? Does, at the end of the day, the buck stop with Boris? Because he is the Prime Minister, he runs the operation at 10 Downing Street, which many people have blamed for sort of holding him back or, miring the waters with sort of a chaotic, laddish operation. I mean, is it his fault, or can we cut him some slack and say that, given the circumstances, he's done the best that he could do?
It is his fault. I mean, given that everyone knows how hard coronavirus is, and I would argue, in fact, many argue, I think, that Boris can seem to have had quite a good coronavirus pandemic, because if you look at the way he released freedoms back last summer, he rolled out the vaccine programme, then the booster programme. He held off the pressure to lock down over Christmas when the other leaders of the devolved regions in Wales and Scotland did that. Yes, there were huge issues at the start of the pandemic. He was too slow to lock down, arguably, and there are big issues about protection of people in care homes. But over the piece, I think you can say, well, he did his best in living and attacking a real-time enemy. So I think putting all that to one side, it is in his control. He is Prime Minister. He can reshape the agenda. We're here to report on what he does. And because he's not doing much at the moment, in fact, all he's doing is appearing in clips in hospitals around the country, and looking like a hunted animal being chased down by TV cameras. And I would argue if he went out and about and actually did a Q&A once a week with voters, that would be difficult for him, no question. Hostile questions, definitely. But equally, I think people might see the reason why they voted for Boris in the first place shine through.
Is there not a worry? I mean, we've had Boris today putting out a clip too, addressing Vladimir Putin, and it worries now that there could be a serious aerial bombardment of Kiev coming up shortly. Is there a risk that Boris Johnson's credibility as a statesman could undermine the UK's statecraft?
Gosh, that's a good question. I do think that the emerging crisis in Ukraine is what could actually snap this place where I am, Westminster, back into reality of what really matters outside in the real world, because I think there's all sorts of issues going forward this week about Ukraine and this crisis there. I think if that does really kick off in a big way, in the way you describe, I think the issue of Sue Gray might become less important.
But is there not a problem now that he's put all the eggs in the inquiry basket, so to speak? And if that inquiry comes back to say rules were knowingly broken, then he's not really left with much road, is he?
Yes, well, it all comes down to what the word knowingly means. If he was aware when he walked into that party in number 10 Downing Street on the 20th of May around 6 p.m. for 25 minutes, was he aware that it was actually a party, or was it a work event? I mean, his defence does fall apart a bit when you look at, he's basically trying to tell people he was being a bit stupid. This is someone who isn't very stupid, he's very clever. And so, yes, there are issues there. I just wonder, you're right, Alex. I mean, if there's a critical report, that would be a difficult. But don't forget, a critical report on its own is no use if MPs don't put letters in of no confidence. Now, if we are about to go to war with Russia or whatever happens over Ukraine, not war, hopefully, but something happens involving troops overseas in some form, then it's going to be very hard, I think, for MPs to think, well, I'm going to put a letter in about whether Boris Johnson turned up to thank staff for 25 minutes in a Downing Street garden. That maybe isn't what's most important right now, is what they might be thinking. So I think what would happen is if Ukraine did kick off, then clearly MPs would think, OK, Boris Johnson's future, I mean, letters can go in at any point. They didn't go, there's no time limit for this to go in. I mean, there's maybe 7 in at the moment. We thought maybe as 30 went in or would have gone in last week, and then some were pulled out. So no one knows how many they've got. So Graham Brady keeps count. When it gets to more than 54, that's when we'll be into a no confidence vote. But MPs can withdraw them, and if Britain is facing down Russia in a conflict zone with our allies, then there's no question MPs may want to ease the pressure on Boris Johnson, make sure he does the best by us.
Yeah, Christopher, thank you. A good point well made there. Christopher Hope, who's the chief political correspondent for The Telegraph.
Thank you.
Now, Emma, I'm going to talk to you about this because, it could be a bit like the Falklands was for Margaret Thatcher, couldn't it? He might actually find a reprieve due to geopolitics when it's not time to change the leader at the top. But do you think he is the right man to be leading the UK, which is essentially leading the world, in standing up against Russia, considering all of these issues that he's mired with back at home?
It would be an extraordinarily amusing twist of fate if it turns out that Ukraine is what saves Boris Johnson's skin in this situation. I think it's possible that it could go, as you say, the way of the Falklands, but I very much doubt, given the entirety of the situation, that it would potentially have that effect. The thing is that I think many people are considering who the other options are. And if we were to be led into, as Chris Hope has pointed out there, Ukraine could be a real wake-up call to knock us back into the real world, away from the insulation that has formed around us politically because of the pandemic. In a situation like that, I think, yes, we will need the continuity of keeping Boris Johnson as our Prime Minister. Many people will be thinking, who on earth could be a better alternative? At least it's sort of a situation of the better the devil you know. And at least he has the experience there, whereas we would be looking at somebody potentially less experienced. I don't think that someone like Liz Truss would be able to step into that role yet. And so I think, given the situation and the other options available, it's possible that Boris Johnson could see himself saved by this. But I don't know whether that would necessarily be a long-term thing.
I mean, where do you stand on Boris the man and his suitability for the role? I mean, I found myself to be pretty agnostic, if not anti-Boris. I think Boris is lovable and affable, but huge question marks over his suitability to hold the highest office in land. But I find myself having buyer's remorse over those views at the moment for the same reasons that you've said. Is this the moment for change at the top? And will this actually encourage the Prime Minister to double down and do good in that role?
Buyer's remorse is a fantastic way of putting it, because I feel like I have buyer's remorse over this as well. I was a huge Boris fan. I'm a Conservative voter. I was absolutely true blue in the last election. I was almost emotional when I saw them take Deanna Davison win Bishop Auckland's seat, and then Bishop had gone blue, and I think many people felt the same. But what we've seen over the past 2 years, and particularly during coronavirus, is really an historic disappointment, an historic missed opportunity, because as Chris Hope alluded to there, maybe he would benefit from going and talking to the people and getting a little bit of that old Boris back, the Boris who made people bang tables during the election campaign. When he walked into pubs and things like that, I'd heard people, in the north receiving him with so much joy because he really connected with the people, that now that all seems to have been lost. He's almost become a sort of czarist figure that holed up in Downing Street, separated from the people, becoming an icon of hypocrisy at a time when people need to see the government behaving in a principled way. And I think that the whole situation around Partygate has the potential to completely undermine not only trust in the Prime Minister, but also trust in the democratic process. And I don't know whether, as you were saying, the situation unfolding around Ukraine, if Sue Gray's report comes back finding that the rules were knowingly broken, I don't know whether that will be enough to convince those MPs who are sitting on the fence, not sure whether they want to put in those letters of no confidence. I'm not sure whether that will be enough to prevent them from doing that.
Yeah, so many ifs, so many caveats. It's going to be a busy week in politics. Well, there we go. That was Emma's view, Christopher Hope's views. I also, of course, want to know your views. You can email me, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or tweet me @gbnews, and I'll get an impression of what you, the nation, really thinks. You're with GB News on TV and, of course, DAB Radio. Time for a short break now with a check on the weather forecast. Fingers crossed it's going to be a good one.
Hello again. A fairly grey Monday for the vast majority, but not much rain around. Most places dry, as they will be for most of this week. Still feeling fairly cold, especially across England and Wales. We've had high pressure in control, slipping away a little to the east, and there is a weak weather front draped across northern Scotland. That will provide some rain and drizzle, chiefly over the Highlands today, and that'll continue on and off across the Western Isles as well. But elsewhere, it is largely dry. Some breaks in the cloud, northeast England, eastern Scotland, and maybe at times across Shetland. Could be a few showers here, though, but elsewhere it's generally dry and cloudy, and it does feel quite cold. 4 or 5 for most towns and cities across England and Wales. Highest temperature probably, if you see a bit of brightness across eastern Scotland, Aberdeenshire could get to 10 or maybe 11. Across to the west, though, there'll still be some drizzly conditions persisting into the evening over the Highlands and the Western Isles, but otherwise it's a dry night. Again, some breaks here and there, which could allow a few pockets of frost. And even when it's cloudy, actually, temperatures are likely to dip close to freezing. So a fairly cold, grey start to Tuesday, more granite skies for most places. A few breaks possible here and there. So again, northeast England, eastern Scotland, perhaps seeing a bit more in the way of sunshine. Any rain and drizzle petering out through the night across the far northwest, but then pepping up again through the afternoon. We'll see a bit more rain just trickling into the Highlands, the Northern Isles, come tomorrow afternoon. Elsewhere, again, dry and cloudy and cold sums it up. Temperatures even lower, only 3 or 4 in some spots. It's going to feel pretty chilly. Again, eastern Scotland could see the highest temperatures. A little bit of rain could trickle in here during Tuesday evening, and same goes for the central belt. Maybe just a little bit of light rain and drizzle during tomorrow evening, but otherwise, again, most places staying dry. Not much rain around this week, certainly not across England and Wales. There will be wet and windy spells across the far north, and although there'll be some sunny spells, generally fairly cloudy.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world. If
you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Welcome back. You're with Alex Phillips here on GB News. And here we go again. Politics is mired by the same accusations guaranteed to rear their ugly heads on a routine basis. For the Labour Party, it's anti-Semitism. For the Tories, of course, Islamophobia. But with all the noise, the taboo, and the ludicrous predictability of how these reports are told and the checkbox soundbites that follow, here comes another inquiry. Aren't we all missing the point? How do we address religion in politics? Do you have to be the right sort of Muslim? Why do we seem less concerned about Hindus in cabinet? And in a country where the leader of the Lib Dems, Tim Farron, felt he had to resign due to Christian values not tallying with his party's ideologies, is it actually fair to demand that privately held religious convictions have no place in secular governance? Because it seems to me the mass hysteria we hear over and over again of accusations of discrimination is actually preventing us having an adult conversation that 21st century Britain so desperately needs. So today, we need to talk about religion versus state. Well, I'm delighted to be joined by Conservative councillor Claire Pearsall and former special advisor Claire Pearsall. That's two Claire Pearsalls. I'm not quite sure how that happened, a double Claire. But let's bring in Claire Pearsall. Claire. Well, there she is. There's Claire. Do you know what? It's a bit of a roller coaster. Mondays, what can you do, eh? Now, let's have a look at these accusations. I mean, should we be running around screaming, this is terrible, we need to get rid of Islamophobia? Or should we be taking a breather and saying, hold on, is there a bigger conversation to be had here?
Well, I do think you're right in the respect of having a proper conversation about religion. I think it's really important to understand what it means for everybody, and it will go into some really uncomfortable territory. Not everybody is familiar with a belief system of every religion that they come across. So it's always really good to have a chat openly about what it means for somebody to be Jewish, to be a Muslim, to be a Hindu, to be a Christian. I think that's vitally important that we don't stray away from it. What I find quite disturbing is the accusations that are being made were from 2020. Now, if this was meant to have been taken seriously, as it should, then why wasn't it investigated then? Why is it taken now until January 2022 for an investigation to be launched?
You make a good point, because it does sort of smack of a cynicism, doesn't it? That all of a sudden, when the Prime Minister's back's against the ropes, here comes the famous old spectre of Islamophobia to haunt him. Are you slightly suspicious of motivations here, or do you think that actually this is sort of all about, you know, perhaps there were other concerns and distractions, and that we really should all be very worried about what's being reported?
I think there's a lot of cynicism around the subject, and I've seen it discussed on social media. However, it may well have been that NUS has taken time to reflect on it and to feel strong enough to come forward. Sometimes it takes someone else to raise an issue, like bullying, as we have seen recently, the whips have been accused of bullying. It may have just taken that to trigger enough confidence in Nusrat Ghani to produce this piece of evidence now. I think it is really important that it is taken seriously, because it is, it is a properly serious matter. But I'm not sure what we're going to find out, because the investigation seems to have no terms of reference, and there is no guarantee that the findings will be reported publicly. So it does sort of beg the question as to what will happen to it and what will be learned from it.
Do you think that there are different rules for different religions when it comes to politics in the UK, that perhaps you do need to be the right sort of Muslim? You know, you have to be a Sadiq Khan or a Sajid Javid who is non-practicing, or a Nadeem Zahawi who has never been particularly explicit about where he is on the religious spectrum. And is it proper, actually, that we say, well, you know, perhaps personal religious views do need to be diluted and watered down if you're going to hold an office of state?
No, I don't think there is one rule for one religion and one for another at all. In the general population, tolerance is extremely high of different backgrounds. In different areas, some pockets of communities are quite highly Muslim or quite highly Jewish, and they seem to rub along quite well with everybody else. So I'm not sure that we can take the argument that they're not the right kind of whichever sector we're looking at. But I find it really uncomfortable that you can't have a conversation about it without straying into the territory of offending somebody.
Yeah, I'm going to bring Emma back into this conversation, because Emma's been a commentator and talks about these things quite a lot when it comes to matters of particularly Islam. Emma, do you think that there is a serious conversation to be had here? We're not talking specifically about Nusrat Ghani here. I'm bringing the conversation on a bit and opening it up to, you know, a broader discourse, so to speak, that can personal and private religious views be compatible with secular governance?
I think they should be, and I say that as someone who is openly Christian. My religious views affect my political views. I don't think it's possible for people to silo off the value system that they hold from their involvement in political activity. So I don't actually think that's something that is really possible to do as an individual. I do think you mentioned Tim Farron. I thought it was a real shame that Tim Farron felt that, you know, for holding his Christian values, that wasn't compatible with the values of being a Liberal Democrat. But I do think that, absolutely right to say that we do have a problem around this debate where we can't engage in these issues without people being afraid of being accused of being offensive in some way, or in this case of being Islamophobic. And I think it's really important that we mentioned that the chief whip, who has been accused of making these statements, has said that he believes that these are defamatory. So whilst there is a bigger conversation to happen around this, I think that this also belongs within a particular debate that has been happening since 2018 within Parliament around Islamophobia and the definition of Islamophobia. And as Nusrat Ghani herself used the term Muslimness, that belongs to a very separate ongoing debate that I think is something that, you know, has actually become quite tense and difficult to discuss, and non-Muslims feel that they can't participate in that discussion through fear of being called Islamophobic.
Yeah, Claire, Emma makes an interesting point when it comes to this sort of clunky word Muslimness, which is there are, you know, elements of Islam, there are things that don't particularly juxtapose well with Western democracy. And surely we should all feel comfortable in what is, broadly speaking, supposed to be a Christian country, and having that conversation when it comes to who's making decisions that affect us all.
We should be comfortable having those conversations, but sadly we're not. Now, if that is a matter for education, then, you know, it needs to start in schools. You need to have that understanding. I know that my son, for example, who is 13, is learning about different cultures and is surrounded by people from different cultures at school, which can only be a good thing. What is worrying is that if you look in depth at any religion and question it, then somebody takes offence, you can be called racist, when all you're doing is trying to investigate exactly what it means to that person. And that's a bigger conversation that I feel that we must have.
And Claire, just quickly and briefly, as a former special advisor and Conservative councillor, do you think your party's got a problem with Islam?
No, I don't. I really don't. I've come across some exceptional councillors who are Muslim, and they work extremely hard, just the same as Christian councillors and the Jewish community that I've come across. So no, I don't think the party has a wider problem with Islamophobia.
Claire, Emma, thank you ever so much. Well, there you go. Once again, that is the views of my guests. Do let me know yours. gbviews@gbnews.uk. You're with GB News on TV and DAB radio. Coming up, we'll be discussing concerns that the new online safety bill won't stop sharing of insidious images of child abuse and violence against women and girls. Now it's time for a check on the news headlines.
It's 2:31. I'm Rosie Wright. Let's get you up to date here in the GB News newsroom. The Prime Minister is warning that Russia invading Ukraine would be a disastrous step and a painful, violent and bloody business. The Foreign Office says some British staff and their dependents are being withdrawn from the embassy in Ukraine in response to the growing threat from Russia. Russia has currently amassed over 100,000 troops at its border with Ukraine, but denies claims it's planning to invade. A lone gunman has wounded several people with a long gun in Germany at a lecture theatre in the southwest city of Heidelberg. Police say that the perpetrator was dead, but didn't give any details of how that happened. The German newspaper Bild is reporting that the shooter opened fire in the lecture hall before then turning his weapon on himself. Boris Johnson has said he's taking the MP Nusrat Ghani's claims that she was sacked as a minister because of concerns about her Muslimness extremely seriously. The Prime Minister has asked the Cabinet to conduct an inquiry into the allegations. She's welcomed the investigation but stressed the inquiry must include all that was said in Downing Street and by the whip. A woman's been stabbed to death and a man killed after being hit by a car in Chippenham Road, Maida Vale, at 9 a.m. today. One witness says he saw a woman being attacked by a man in a struggle, and the pair moved into the road where they were both hit by a car. Both victims were pronounced dead at the scene. The Metropolitan Police has launched an urgent investigation. Boris Johnson has announced that coronavirus testing for fully vaccinated travellers arriving in England will be axed. The Prime Minister didn't confirm when the travel rules would be eased, but it's expected to happen before the February half-term break. The Transport Secretary Grant Shapps should announce the details of the new travel regulations in the Commons this afternoon. When he does, we'll bring that to you. You are now up to date here. We're on your TV, online and DAB Plus radio. We'll have a short break now, and then we'll be back to Alex and We Need to Talk About.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world. If
you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Welcome back to We Need to Talk About. This is GB News and I'm Alex Phillips. The UK government is in the process of drafting the online safety bill, which they claim will make the country the safest online place in the world. I cry BS. Critics say the watered-down proposals are weak, if not dangerous, in failing to even remotely address the greatest threats of paedophilia, extreme permissiveness and pornography. Well, here's a truth bomb. The UK is even further behind on online regulation of porn than France, hardly a country deemed prudish, and Germany, once considered porn capital of Europe, who will both block 5 widely watched sites unless they introduce age verification. Look, to anybody with half a brain, it's evident that the pervasiveness of porn is now so extreme that it's a public health crisis. But will the Conservative Party remember small c conservatism and crack down on insalubrious smut, or buckle under the dot-com bros' super libertarian dystopia? We really need to talk about porn. And I'm delighted to be joined now by Andy Burrows, Head of Child Safety Online Policy at the NSPCC, and Ian Corby, Executive Director at the Age Verification Providers Association. Andy, I'm going to start with you. Do you have any hope at all that this online safety bill that the government are bringing forward is going to do anything that we need it to do?
Well, it's really over to the Culture Secretary, Nadine Dorries, to listen now to a second committee of MPs who said that the draft bill that was published last year really needs to be significantly strengthened. We know that the basis is there in the draft legislation for the UK to really lead the way, to catch up with those other European countries and to deliver legislation which is long overdue for children and young people. But we have to see the Culture Secretary really now start to be in listening mode, to engage with the concerns that have been expressed by MPs and civil society, because the stakes here for children and families are really, really high.
What are the big harms? Because I find myself constantly trying to have this conversation with members of the general public, and it's as if I'm introducing them to this problem for the very first time. People are, why are you so worried about porn? And I say, well, for instance, you've got children under 18 having cosmetic surgery, girls committing suicide, minors being groomed, a pervasiveness of ultra-permissiveness in society that goes from pop music to fashion to rape culture in schools. And yet it seems to me that not enough people are aware of quite how dangerous unregulated pornography is.
Well, what we know is that the majority of young people, teenagers or even younger than that, very often stumble across pornography for the first time. They're not trying to access it, they stumble across it. Now, that's either on commercial pornography websites or that is on social networks, the likes of Twitter, where we know that adult pornographic content is not only freely available, but algorithms kick in and will actively promote that to children and young people. And we know that that could be really disturbing and damaging for children and young people who aren't sure what they're seeing. We know it can distort their view of sex and relationships. And we know that that can go on to have a desensitizing effect, and that children and young people can then go on a journey of looking to access more and more extreme forms of pornography. So, this is why it's really important that there's a requirement on platforms, on commercial pornography websites, to make sure that the drawbridge is pulled up. So children are able to, use social networks and access age-appropriate content, but they're not able to stumble across really harmful forms of content like this.
Yeah, I'm delighted that I've got you here, Ian, as Executive Director at Age Verification Providers Association, because so often when I have this conversation with people say, oh, well, you can try putting age verification on, but it won't work. Kids will be able to watch it anyway. But that's not true, is it? There's very sophisticated technology, and this could have been done a decade ago, frankly.
It certainly could. I mean, it's worth bearing in mind this was in the 2015 Conservative Manifesto. It was legislated for in 2017. In 2019, they abandoned it, perhaps because there was a general election called 12 days after that announcement. But we are now hopefully going to get it into the online safety bill. But again, we're still going to be waiting maybe 3 years from now until there's any impact in terms of what people are able to see. And as we say, what kids can stumble across. Now, the purpose of age verification is not to be 100% perfect, because that would mean every time you pick up a computer, you'd have to prove your age. What we're doing is to prevent what Andy's worried about, which is kids stumbling across pornography. And we're doing that by giving people a whole range of options for how to prove their age, trying to make sure they only need to do so perhaps once every 3 months, even once a year, and that they can then travel around the internet as adults, free to see whatever they choose to see, but safe in the knowledge that their kids aren't going to do a school project on blue tits and suddenly discover something rather disturbing.
I mean, it occurs to me actually in this debate, and I've often said that, you know, a great way to put age verification in place would be for people to have to put in bank card details. And frankly, you have to be over 18 to have bank card details. And every time I raise this, people say, well, I wouldn't be comfortable putting my bank card into a porn site, which makes me think you don't really trust the porn sites, do you? So frankly, shouldn't the whole lot just be regulated or banned?
Well, I'm always a little bit amused when people get so concerned about, you know, sharing their data with these sites, because trust me, these sites are harvesting a huge amount of data on you because they then serve you with more content because they want to keep you on that site for longer. And of course, the trouble with that is if a child stumbles across particularly disturbing pornography, the site's going to think that that's what they're interested in and serve them even more of it. So actually, bank cards do tend to prove to be one of the more popular ways of proving your age. But the technology is good enough to take a look at me and figure out that I'm definitely over 25 and not need to ask me for any further identity. But if you're under 25, you could perhaps log into your bank and demonstrate your age by being able to use open banking. Or we could use voice print analysis. Or you could provide some ID if you want. But all of this is done to independent third-party highly regulated providers who have to comply with data protection laws, so you can be confident that you are not going to have your full identity disclosed to any of those adult sites. Because I always say to people, be so careful about what you share in terms of data online, because the technology is so sophisticated these days, it will see through many of the protections you think you're putting in place.
And Andy, back to you. Do you think that in a way, organisations like you are being forced to just sort of push for the low-hanging fruit at this stage by pointing out that, you know, minors are being groomed by paedophiles and there are child abuse videos and photographs being freely shared, and that, you know, clearly this is wrong, when actually you should be going straight in with a stake at the heart and saying the entire industry is deeply injurious, not just to children, but frankly, adults too?
Well, you know, we really need to see legislation here, because I think we've seen time and time again that this is just not something in terms of making sure their sites are safe, that only, children can access appropriate content. This isn't something that the industry is ready to do for themselves. And that's why we really do need to see the government step in here. And, you know, one of the things that concerns me is that even if we see the loophole in this bill closed around commercial pornography websites, then there's still a risk that platforms like OnlyFans, which have grown rapidly and, you know, used by creators in inverted commas to post their own sexually explicit material. The way in which the draft bill has been constructed means that those types of sites could actually fall outside of the legislation. So, you know, unless we see the bill strengthened in that respect, we've got an OnlyFans loophole where children and young people could be able to, freely access adult content on that site, and then those creators will continue posting adult videos to the likes of Twitter and TikTok as essentially promo material. And again, that's where the algorithms will start to kick in and really reinforce this problem.
Yeah, Andy, Ian, thank you so much for your contribution on this today, and keep up the good work and keep fighting for a less smutty society. Now, Emma, I want to talk to you about this because you tend to sort of lean towards more libertarian values, whereas I'm frankly a modern-day Mary Whitehouse. Where do you stand in this debate?
I'm not sure that I do tend towards libertarian values. Under certain circumstances, under coronavirus and with all of the public health policies, I have ended up accidentally sort of finding myself sort of more libertarian than many of the libertarians in that respect. But on social issues, I tend to be quite conservative, and I do agree with you. I'm also very concerned about porn being harmful. But I do think with the online safety bill, one of the issues, and this is something that has been raised in the news recently also, is that the online safety bill wants to regulate content that is, as they put it, legal but harmful. So things that are psychologically harmful, not just to children, but also to adults. And I think the concern here is that actually there's a lot of stuff online that is illegal and harmful. And that is the stuff that the government should be focusing its attention on, rather than things that would have a chilling effect on free speech. So things that people might regard as being offensive and therefore harmful. So I do agree. I think that many of the points that your guests raise are really important ones. And we do need to be safeguarding children from not only accessing content that is explicit, but also regulating things around child pornography, things that are already illegal. And I think that that should be the government's priority, and that they shouldn't even be considering trying to legislate against content that they believe is legal but harmful to adults.
Yeah, we need one heck of a big bill, don't we? It's, I think, 1990 Computer Misuse Act was the last time anyone decided to try and do anything about the internet. What are your views? You've been emailing us throughout the show today. Wanda says, and this is going back to our first story, Boris Johnson and Sue Gray's incoming reports. Boris Johnson is probably our best route to a return to the true Conservative values of freedom and common sense. Well, let's see what he has to say about the online safety bill, eh? Kenny says, it seems to me that if Boris has to resign, then so should Starmer, as I think he broke the rules too. Well, let's just have a mass exodus from the Commons, why don't we? Chris says, Boris is the best the Tories have. Let him have a chance to redeem himself and let the next election make the decision on the country's direction. That is probably the most democratic route. Jane says, in my opinion, Boris should not be forced out, particularly at this turbulent time. MPs need to stop playing politics and pursuing their own agendas and put our country first. Also, it's up to us as the electorate, something they seem to have forgotten. Very good point there. Well, God Save the Queen trended on Twitter over the weekend due to the sheer volume of hashtags emanating from Ukraine as Britain leads the world in supplying the beleaguered nation with defence weapons. Boris Johnson has finally broken cover today and warned Putin that invading Ukraine would be violent, bloody and painful as the UK follows the US in evacuating embassy staff from Kiev as UK intelligence fears a lightning raid of aerial bombardment on the capital. The UK is now leading the world on producing a package of stringent economic sanctions and will be speaking to international allies throughout the day, as divisions in the EU, led by German self-interest, continue to undermine a cohesive NATO approach. But is being the adult in the room good for Britain? Or are we inviting a whole world of difficulty and putting our national interests at risk? We really need to talk about the UK and Ukraine. Here's what Prime Minister Boris Johnson had to say about the possible Russian invasion earlier today.
The intelligence is very clear that there are 60 Russian battle groups, about 60 Russian battle groups on the borders of Ukraine. The plan for a lightning war that could take out Kiev is one that everybody can see. We need to make it very clear to the Kremlin, to Russia, that that would be a disastrous step. And so what we're saying is that the UK is leading on creating a package of economic sanctions, working with our partners around the world. Might be talking to them this afternoon, this evening, talking to colleagues in other capitals and in Washington. But we also need to get over the message that invading Ukraine from a Russian perspective is going to be a painful, violent and bloody business. And I think it's very important that people in Russia understand that this could be a new Chechnya.
Well, let's actually start by unpacking this whole situation. And who better to do that than Dr. Alan Mendoza of the Henry Jackson Society. Alan, it's been a while. Haven't seen you for a good deal. Now, let's actually have a little look at how we got here, because I don't think I've seen any channel do much of an explainer on the nature of Ukraine and the fact that it is actually a bit of a divided territory.
Well, of course, Ukraine's divided territory because it's been invaded by Russia, firstly in 2014 when Crimea was seized by the Russians, and secondly, of course, when Vladimir Putin encouraged basically a secession or an attempted secession from the east of Ukraine. And of course, you now have the two eastern provinces that are essentially under the control of Kremlin allies in what you might call a frozen conflict, i.e. it's not necessarily a hot war. I mean, there's a bit of firing here and there, but it's not a full-scale conflict, but it's frozen because, of course, the situation hasn't been resolved, despite there being a diplomatic process rumbling on since, for a few years in the Minsk protocol. So the question really at the moment is, what is Vladimir Putin's move around all of this? And, can we predict it? And what's our response?
And is our response what you'd hope and expect it to be? Because you've got Germany there who are really sort of prevaricating on saying anything of any substance because they're worried about their gas coming from Russia. France are sort of pretty much doing the same. Perhaps Eastern members of the EU want to see more decisive action, given that they might feel at risk themselves. And the UK is saying that they're leading the way, providing defence weaponry, a few troops to go and help train the Ukrainian soldiers, and now saying they're going to lead their own economic sanctions. Is this our mess to be dealing with? Is this in our national interest?
Well, you're certainly right to highlight the mess, and I think the sort of the mixed messages Vladimir Putin is getting is very much in his to his delight. Basically, I don't think he could possibly have imagined that our response would be quite as chaotic as it would have been, with different partners pulling off in different directions. And look, there is a school of thought that says he is simply dangling us along, waiting for us essentially to implode among ourselves, and then he'll just walk in to pick up the pieces. And I think we've been doing a good job, obviously, of not exactly convincing him that we will be putting a firm resistance up to it. But you ask an important question, which is, what is in our national interest? And quite clearly, the Ukraine is a democratic ally. It is, if you like, a country that's been invaded before. We know the Russians have been up to all manner of problematic behaviour within the UK. I mean, poisoning people, causing social media disturbances, attempting to influence our politics, and of course also to buzz our airspace and make incursions in our sea space. So we know the Russians are up to no good in general towards us. So of course we want to be supportive of Ukraine in its democratic right to have a free country. And that is, of course, what is always in our interest, to promote freedom, liberty and democracy across the world when at all possible.
There seems to be a bit of a trend in politics on the West, particularly populism, let's say, that's sort of saying, well, countries like the UK and US should keep their noses out. There's too much for us to lose. Gas prices are soaring anyway. And if, Putin's been causing us all these headaches up until now, is that not only going to get worse when he thinks that there's retribution to be had?
Well, the problem, Alex, is, of course, if you say, well, let him do what he wants, or let everyone do what they want, before you know it, it's the 1930s again, in the sense of the aggressor then carries the biggest stick in the room. You will find the world very quickly sort of carved up by those who wish to take over their neighbours, and then you create very powerful blocs opposed to you. I think we start from the premise that the Russians under Vladimir Putin, the Putin regime, is antithetical to what the West believes in, and of course is hostile to our interests. So from our strategic perspective, sitting back and allowing it to become even stronger makes no sense at all. Equally, let's assume Russia rolls into Ukraine, either turns into a client state or controls it completely. Well, then you've got Russia on the borders of several NATO allied countries. And, who's to say that Putin will stop just at Ukraine? Maybe he wishes to recreate the entire former Soviet empire. We don't know that. So the point is, we would then be potentially dragged into an actual hot war if our NATO allies in the East were to be attacked by him. Now, if you have the choice of trying to deter aggression or then reacting to aggression by fighting it yourself with military means, deterrence is always a better form, isn't it? Prevention is always a better form than trying to resolve something militarily. And even, someone like Churchill mentioned, Georgia is better than war, and whatever obstacles we can throw up to stop a conflict is much more in our interest than allowing the Russians to roll over Ukraine, potentially into much more of Europe.
Alan, thank you so much. Great having you back on my show. I've missed you, mate. Nice to see you. Now, Emma, we've got very, very limited time left. Yes or no, should we be going in and helping the Ukrainians?
Absolutely, we should. And no, I think that the West has really sent the wrong message with China and Hong Kong, over Afghanistan. We've signalled our weakness. I think it's absolutely important that we do this. And one of the reasons is exactly as Alan Mendoza has pointed out there, because it's in our interest to prevent ourselves from slipping into a situation that would very easily escalate.
Well put. Thank you, Emma. It's been delightful having your company today. We'll have you back again soon. Your insights have been extremely valuable and very much valued. And thank you, the viewer, for joining me today, both watching telly and on your radio or whatever magical, phantasmagoric platform you've been using. That's all I've got time for today. Join me again for We Need to Talk About on GB News, same place, same time, from 2 o'clock tomorrow. Coming up next, of course, it's The Briefing with the glorious Darren McCaffrey for all the political gossip and the latest on what's going on with 50 Shades of Grey. First of all, though, it's time for the weather forecast. Have a glorious afternoon and evening. Bye-bye from me.
Hello again. A fairly grey Monday for the vast majority, but not much rain around. Most places dry as they will be for most of this week. Still feeling fairly cold, especially across England and Wales. We've had high pressure in control, slipping away a little to the east, and there is a weak weather front draped across northern Scotland. That will provide some rain and drizzle, chiefly over the Highlands today, and that'll continue on and off